The alarm woke Hyun-woo from a restless sleep. He rolled out of his bunk and grabbed his jacket, already moving toward the bridge before his mind fully caught up with his body. After 15 years of running cargo through the outer systems, certain sounds meant only one thing: opportunity or trouble, and sometimes both at once. Mireille was already at her station when he arrived, her fingers dancing across the console screens. She looked up briefly, her dark eyes reflecting the pale blue light of the displays. Distress beacon, Velnar Expanse, about 3 hours away at current speed. Anyone else picking it up? Hyun-woo asked, sliding into the captain's chair. Not that I can tell. We're pretty far out here. Mireille pulled up the signal data. It's Takresh. That made Hyun-woo pause. The Takresh were not the kind of species that sent distress signals. They were predators, warriors, the kind of aliens that made other aliens nervous just by existing. They had claws that could tear through hull plating, and eyes that could see in darkness that would blind most other species. They took what they wanted and apologized to no one. Could be a trap, Do-yoon said from the navigation console. The young man had only been with the crew for 6 months, but he had good instincts. Takresh, don't ask for help. Hyun-woo considered this. Do-yoon was right to be cautious. But out here, in the empty spaces between worlds, you didn't ignore distress calls, not if you wanted to sleep at night. Set course, but keep the weapons ready. Just in case. The journey to the beacon took longer than expected. The Velnar Expanse was a graveyard of old asteroids and cosmic debris, the kind of place where navigation was more art than science. When they finally found the source of the signal, even Hyun-woo felt a chill run down his spine. The Takresh warship hung in space like a broken toy. Half of it was simply gone, torn away by weapons fire that had left the edges glowing with residual heat. The rest was a twisted mess of metal and darkness. No lights. No power signatures. Just the steady pulse of the distress beacon, calling out to anyone who would listen. Life signs? Hyun-woo asked. Mireille shook her head slowly. Nothing. If anyone survived, they're not moving. They docked carefully, using the magnetic clamps to attach to what remained of the warship's hull. Hyun-woo, Mireille, and Do-yoon suited up, checking their gear twice before stepping through the airlock. The inside of the Takresh ship was worse than the outside. Bodies floated in the zero gravity, their fur matted with frozen blood. The walls were scorched and torn. Whatever had happened here, it had been brutal and fast. Stay together, Hyun-woo said quietly. His voice sounded strange in his helmet, flat and small. We salvage what we can and get out. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, stepping carefully around the dead. Do-yoon was pale behind his helmet visor, but he kept moving. Mireille was already scanning for anything valuable, her practiced eye picking out intact systems and salvageable tech. This was the ugly part of the salvage business. The part that kept you awake some nights. But it was also how you survived out here. They were in the cargo hold when Mireille stopped suddenly. Wait. I'm getting something. Wait. Life sign? Hyun-woo moved to her side, his hand instinctively going to the weapon at his hip. Maybe. It's faint. Mireille pointed to a corner of the hold, where a small containment pod lay half-crushed beneath a fallen support beam. The pod's status light was blinking red, but it was still blinking. Something's in there. It took all 3 of them to move the beam. When they finally pulled it away and opened the pod, Hyun-woo found himself looking down at a pair of golden eyes set in a small, furry face. The Takresh cub couldn't have been more than a few months old. Its fur was gray and black, soft in a way that adult Takresh fur never was. Its claws were tiny, barely visible, and it was terrified. The cub exploded out of the pod with a high-pitched snarl, all teeth and panic. It slashed at the air, at shadows, at nothing at all. Then it scrambled into the corner and pressed itself against the wall, making a sound that was somewhere between a growl and a whimper. We should leave it, Doyun said immediately. It's Takresh. Do you know what they'll do to us if they find out we? It's a child, Hyunwoo said quietly. He moved slowly toward the cub, hands raised. The little creature snarled at him, its eyes wild. But beneath the fear and anger, Hyunwoo could see something else. Confusion. Loneliness. The cub had watched everyone it knew die. It had been trapped in that pod for who knew how long. Alone in the dark, with the bodies of its people floating outside. Hyunwoo, Mireille said carefully. Doyun has a point. The Takresh don't exactly have a reputation for forgiveness. If we take that cub, we're asking for trouble. I know. Hyunwoo kept his eyes on the cub. It was still snarling, but the sound was getting weaker. It was exhausted. But I'm not leaving a terrified kid here to die. Get a containment crate. Something with padding. Mireille sighed, but she went. That was one of the things Hyunwoo appreciated about his crew. They might argue, but in the end, they trusted him, even when he made decisions that probably weren't very smart. Getting the cub into the crate was an adventure. It fought every step of the way, scratching and biting at the air, making sounds that seemed far too big for its small body. But eventually, exhaustion won. The cub collapsed into the padded crate, panting hard, its golden eyes never leaving Hyunwoo's face. They carried it back to the Dawn Treader carefully, like it was made of glass. Hyunwoo could feel Doyun's disapproval radiating through his suit, but the young navigator kept his mouth shut. For now, back on the ship, they set up a makeshift pen in the cargo bay. The cub lay in the corner of its crate, watching them with those huge eyes. It wouldn't eat. It wouldn't drink. It just stared and occasionally let out a small, sad sound that made Hyunwoo's chest hurt. What are we going to do with it? Doyun asked that night, after they'd jumped away from the wreckage and set course for the nearest station. Hyunwoo looked at the security feed showing the cargo bay. The cub was curled into a tight ball, trembling. The Takresh are going to want it back. Probably. They might kill us for taking it. Maybe. Hyunwoo turned away from the screen. But what kind of person would I be if I left a scared kid to die alone? What kind of people would we be? Doyun didn't have an answer for that. Neither did Mireille. They all just stood there for a moment, thinking about the choice they'd made and what it might cost them. In the cargo bay, alone in the dark, the Takresh cub began to whimper. It was a sound of pure nightmare, of a child lost in a world that had suddenly become nothing but terror and death. The sound echoed through the ship's metal corridors like a warning. None of them knew it yet, but that sound would become very familiar in the days to come. The first night was terrible. The second night was worse. Hyunwoo had been woken by distress calls before, by alarms and emergencies, and all the various disasters that could happen on a ship in deep space. But he had never been woken by screaming quite like this. It started around 2 a.m, ship time, a sound that began as a low growl and climbed quickly into a shriek that seemed to vibrate in his bones. He ran to the cargo bay in his sleep clothes, Mireille and Doyun, right behind him. The cub was throwing itself against the walls of its pen, claws scrabbling at the metal. Eyes wide, but somehow not seeing anything that was actually there. It was fighting something that existed only in its mind, and losing. Do something, Doyun yelled over the noise. But what could they do? Hyunwoo approached the pen carefully, speaking in soft tones that were completely drowned out by the cub's screaming. When he got close enough to touch the bars, the little creature turned on him with a snarl, slashing at his hand. He pulled back just in time. The episode lasted 20 minutes. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The cub collapsed in the corner, panting and shaking, and fell into an exhausted sleep. The crew stood there in their pajamas, staring at each other in the sudden silence. Well, Mireille said finally. It wasn't new the next night, or the night after that. The nightmares came every time the cub slept, regular as clockwork. Mireille adjusted the lighting in the cargo bay, thinking maybe the darkness was triggering something. It didn't help. Doyun found recordings of Takresh vocalizations on the galactic net. Gentle sounds that adult Takresh made to comfort their young. The cub only screamed louder when they played them. They tried sedatives, purchased at great expense from a medical supply station. The cub fought the injection like they were trying to murder it, and when the drugs finally took hold, the nightmares only got worse. The little creature thrashed and howled in its drugged sleep, unable to wake up, trapped in whatever horror was playing behind its closed eyes. No more sedatives, Hyunwoo ordered, and no one argued with him. Mireille named the cub Taeyang on the 4th day, when a shaft of sunlight from the ship's viewports caught its eyes and made them shine like molten gold. If we're going to keep it, it needs a name, she said. Can't keep calling it the cub forever. Doyun didn't think they should keep it at all. He said so at least once a day, usually after another sleepless night, listening to Taeyang's screams. We can't do this forever. We're all exhausted. The cub's exhausted. We need to take it to a station. Find someone who knows how to deal with traumatized Takresh young. Who? Hyunwoo asked tiredly. The Takresh themselves? They'll just take it, and we'll never know if it's okay. Some research facility? They'll treat it like a specimen. At least here. We're trying. Trying isn't enough if we can't actually help. Hyunwoo didn't have a good answer for that. The truth was, Doyun was right. They were in, over their heads, but every time he thought about giving up, he remembered those golden eyes staring at him from the wreckage. Terrified and alone. He remembered making the choice to bring Taeyang aboard. You didn't make a choice like that and then quit when things got hard. That night, Hyunwoo made a decision. Instead of going to bed, he took his pillow and a blanket and set himself up in the cargo bay, just outside Taeyang's pen. The cub watched him from its corner, suspicious and scared. Hyunwoo didn't try to touch it or talk to it. He just settled down with his datapad and started reading. Taeyang growled at him for a while. Then, when nothing bad happened, the growling faded to an occasional suspicious rumble. Eventually, the cub's eyes began to close. Hyunwoo tensed, waiting for the screaming to start. It started. Taeyang jerked awake with a snarl, scrambling backward, claws out. But this time, Hyunwoo didn't run to get the others. He just stayed where he was, sitting calmly outside the pen. It's okay, he said quietly. You're safe. Nothing's going to hurt you here. The cub didn't understand his words, of course. But maybe it understood his tone. Or maybe it was just too tired to keep fighting. After a few minutes, Taeyang stopped snarling. Its breathing slowed. It curled back up, though its eyes stayed open, watching Hyunwoo. This happened 3 more times that night. Each time, Hyunwoo just sat there, speaking softly, making himself a calm presence in the darkness. By the 4th time, Taeyang barely woke up at all. Just a small whimper, a confused look around, and then back to sleep. Mireille found them in the morning. Both of them asleep. Hyunwoo was slumped against the wall, his datapad fallen from his hand. Taeyang was curled in a ball, closer to the edge of the pen than it had ever been before, as close to Hyunwoo as the bars would allow. You're going to hurt your back sleeping like that, Mireille said softly, not wanting to wake the cub. Hyunwoo opened one eye. Maybe. But it worked. It became their new routine. Every night, Hyunwoo would set up his makeshift bed in the cargo bay. He'd read or do paperwork, or sometimes just sit there, thinking about nothing in particular. And every night, Taeyang would watch him until sleep became too heavy to resist. The nightmares still came, but they were different now. Shorter, less intense. When Taeyang woke up scared, Hyunwoo would talk to it until the fear passed. Sometimes he told stories about his childhood on Earth, about running through rice fields with his cousins or learning to cook from his grandmother. The cub didn't understand the words, but it seemed to like the sound of his voice. On the 10th night, something changed. Taeyang woke from a nightmare with the usual frightened growl. But instead of scrambling to the back of the pen, it moved to the front. It pressed its small body against the bars, making a sound that was more sad than scared. Hyunwoo set down his datapad. He moved closer to the pen, slowly enough that Taeyong could back away if it wanted to. The cub didn't back away. It pushed its paw through the bars, claws retracted, trembling. Without thinking too hard about it, Hyunwoo reached out and gently covered the small paw with his hand. His much larger, clumsier, humanly soft hand. With no claws at all, Taeyong went very still. Its golden eyes locked onto Hyunwoo's face with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Taeyong's eyes began to close. The trembling stopped. The cub's breathing evened out into the deep, steady rhythm of real sleep. Not the exhausted collapse that followed the nightmares, but actual, peaceful sleep. Hyunwoo stayed there for an hour, his hand covering that small paw, his back screaming at him for sitting in such an awkward position. He didn't care, because for the first time since they'd found it, Taeyong was sleeping without fear. When he finally pulled his hand away and retreated to his blanket, Taeyong didn't wake up. It slept through the rest of the night, and when morning came, it opened its eyes without screaming. Mireille and Doyun stood in the doorway of the cargo bay, watching their captain sleep on the floor next to a pen containing an alien predator that had, somehow, stopped being quite so frightening. "We're keeping it, aren't we?" Doyun said. He didn't sound angry anymore. Just resigned. "Yeah," Mireille said softly. "I think we are." The message came through on the third week. Hyunwoo was in the middle of teaching Taeyong to eat from a bowl instead of making a mess all over the cargo bay floor when Mireille's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "Hyunwoo, you need to see this. Now." The tone in her voice made his stomach drop. He gave Taeyong one last pat on the head. The cub had started letting him do that a few days ago, and headed to the bridge. Taeyong followed, its claws clicking on the metal floor. The little creature followed him everywhere now, like a shadow, with fur and teeth. Mireille was staring at her screen with an expression Hyunwoo had learned to recognize over the years. It was her, "This is going to be a problem" face. "Word got out," she said simply. "About Taeyong? About us having a Takresh cub on a human ship. It's all over the local nets. Some dock worker at our last station must have talked." She pulled up the messages that had been flooding in. Most were just curious or gossipy, but a few made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. "The Takresh government has been trying to contact us. They want their cub back." Doyun, sitting at the navigation console, turned around slowly. "I said this was going to happen. I said it from the beginning. I know what you said." Hyunwoo ran a hand through his hair. At his feet, Taeyong made a small chirping sound, sensing his stress. The cub had started making that sound when it wanted attention or comfort. "What exactly are they saying?" OP. 1. Mireille played the message. It was in Galactic Standard, the trade language that most species used when dealing with each other. The voice was female, hard-edged, and formal. "This is Envoy Veskra of the Takresh Diplomatic Corps. We are aware that you have retrieved a Takresh youngling from the wreckage in the Velnar Expanse. This youngling is property of the Takresh people and must be returned immediately. Failure to comply will result in formal charges and sanctions. We will be sending a representative to your next port of call." The message ended. The bridge was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's engines and Taeyong's soft breathing. "Property," Hyunwoo said quietly. "They called Taeyong property. That's how they see their young," Mireille said. "At least officially. I did some research. Takresh cubs don't have individual rights until they pass their trials at adulthood. Until then, they belong to their clan." "That's insane." "That's their culture." Mireille looked at Taeyong, who was now sitting next to Hyunwoo's leg, tail wrapped around its paws. "But I don't think our little friend here would do well back with them. It's bonded to you. Taking it away now would be like ripping it away from its parent." The word parent hit Hyunwoo harder than he expected. He wasn't Taeyong's parent. He was just a human who had made a stupid, impulsive decision to save a life. Except somewhere along the way, while sleeping on the cargo bay floor and holding a scared cub's paw through nightmares, it had become more than that. "What are our options?" he asked. Do-yoon pulled up the legal codes on his screen. "Not great. Galactic law says that the species of origin has the right to claim their young. The only exception is if we can prove that returning the cub would cause it harm." "The nightmares," Hyunwoo said. "Taeyong was a wreck when we found it. We've got all the recordings from those first weeks. That might not be enough. The Takresh will argue they have better facilities and experts who understand their species. They'll say we don't know what we're doing." Mireille drummed her fingers on her console. "And honestly, they're not entirely wrong. We've been making this up as we go." "When said, ask 75. Hyunwoo looked down at Taeyong. The cub looked back up at him with those golden eyes, trusting and calm. A month ago, those same eyes had been wild with terror. "We're not giving it back," Hyunwoo, Do-yoon started. "No. I don't care what the law says. I don't care what the Takresh want. Taeyong stays with us." They reached the station 2 days later. The Takresh envoy was waiting for them at the docking bay. Impossible to miss. Veskra was nearly 7 feet tall, her gray fur marked with the scars of a warrior. Her claws were filed sharp. Her eyes were the deep amber of old blood. She had 2 guards with her, both armed. Hyunwoo met her alone, leaving Mireille and Do-yoon on the ship with Taeyong. The little cub had whimpered when he left, but Mireille had distracted it with a game. It still broke his heart a little. "Captain Hyunwoo," Veskra said. Her galactic standard was perfect, but her voice carried the deep rumble that all Takresh had. "I am here for the youngling. The cub's name is Taeyong," Hyunwoo said. "And I'm not handing it over." Veskra's ears flattened against her skull, a sign of anger in Takresh body language. "You have no right to keep one of our young. This is not a negotiation." "You're right, it's not." Hyunwoo held his ground. Even though every instinct in his body was screaming at him to back away from the massive predator in front of him, because Taeyong isn't going anywhere. The youngling is traumatized, yes. We are aware. That is exactly why it needs to be with its own kind, in a proper facility where what? Where it can be trained to be a good little warrior, where it can learn that showing fear is weakness. Hyunwoo could feel his temper rising. "I saw what Taeyong was like when we found it. Terrified. Alone. Having nightmares every single night. And now, it's not. It's healing. It's learning to trust again. And you want to tear it away from the only safe place it's known since its entire world ended?" Veskra leaned down, bringing her face close to his. Her breath smelled like metal and spice. "You are human. Prey. You cannot raise a predator. Watch me." For a long moment, they stood there, staring at each other. Hyunwoo was acutely aware of the guards, of their weapons, of how easily this could go wrong. But he didn't back down. Finally, Veskra straightened up. "This matter is not finished. The council will hear of your refusal. There will be consequences. Let them come." The envoy left, her guards following. Hyunwoo waited until they were gone before letting out the breath he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Back on the ship, Taeyong rushed to him the moment he stepped through the airlock. The cub jumped up, putting its paws on his legs, making urgent chirping sounds, checking that he was okay, making sure he'd come back. Hyunwoo knelt down and pulled the cub into a hug. Taeyong allowed it, even nuzzled against his chest. A month ago, this would have been impossible. The cub would have torn him apart for trying. "What did we just do?" Do-yoon asked quietly. Mireille put a hand on the young navigator's shoulder. "The right thing. Or at least, the Takresh don't forget," Do-yoon said. "They don't forgive. This is going to follow us. Action dock slime. End auction. Then dock slime. Then dock slime." The Tokresh don't forgive. This is going to follow us. Then Doc Slime. Then Doc Slime. Then Doc Slime. Then Doc Slime. Hyunwoo stood up. Taeyang still pressed against his legs. I know. But what else could I do? Just hand over a scared kid to people who see it as property? I couldn't do that. I won't do that. That night, Taeyang slept curled up next to Hyunwoo's makeshift bed in the cargo bay. No nightmares came. The cub breathed deeply and peacefully, one paw stretched out to rest against Hyunwoo's leg. In the darkness, Hyunwoo stared at the ceiling and wondered what he'd gotten them all into. The Tokresh were powerful, influential, and now they were angry. This wasn't going to end with one refused demand. There would be more messages, more pressure, maybe worse. But when he looked at Taeyang, sleeping peacefully for the first time in its young life, he couldn't regret it. Some things were worth the risk. Some things were worth any price. The summons arrived exactly 3 weeks after Veskra's visit. It was delivered by an official courier, sealed with the mark of the Tokresh Council itself. Hyunwoo opened it in the ship's galley, while Mireille and Do-yeon watched over his shoulder. Taeyang was on the floor, playing with a piece of scrap metal that Mireille had shaped into a ball. They want you on Tokresh Prime, Mireille read, for a formal custody hearing. In 2 weeks. Do-yeon leaned against the counter, arms crossed. It's a trap. Has to be. They're going to grab Taeyang the moment we land and throw you in some prison for the rest of your life. Maybe, Hyunwoo said. He was watching Taeyang bat the metal ball around, completely unaware that its entire future was being decided. The cub had grown in the past month. Its fur was thicker now, shinier. Its eyes were brighter. It looked healthy, happy even. But if we don't go, we'll be running forever. Every station, every port, will be looking over our shoulders. So we run, Do-yeon said. Plenty of space out here to disappear in. With a Tokresh cub? Everyone will be looking for us. Mireille shook her head. We need to settle this, one way or another. Hyunwoo looked at the summons again. The formal language, the official seals, all of it was designed to intimidate. And it was working. A little. But beneath the fear, there was something else. If the Tokresh were willing to put this before their council, that meant there was a chance. A small one, maybe, but a chance nonetheless. We go, he said finally. But we go prepared. Mireille, I need you to pull together all the recordings from those first weeks. Every nightmare. Every episode. I want documentation of Taeyang's condition when we found it and how it's improved. Do-yeon, find me everything you can about Tokresh custody law. There has to be precedent, some loophole, something. They worked for the next 2 weeks like their lives depended on it. Because, in a way, they did. Mireille compiled hours of footage showing Taeyang's transformation from a terrified, traumatized cub to the playful, trusting creature it had become. Do-yeon dug through legal databases until his eyes hurt, building arguments and counter-arguments. Taeyang didn't understand what was happening, of course. It just knew that everyone was busy and stressed. The cub tried to help in its own way, bringing them things it thought they might need. Tools, food packets, once even Hyunwoo's favorite jacket that it had dragged from his quarters. It made them all laugh. Even Do-yeon, which was something. The journey to Tokresh Prime took 5 days. As they approached the planet, Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten. It was beautiful in a harsh way. All red rocks and dark forests, with cities that looked like they'd been carved from mountains. This was a warrior's world, built by predators for predators, and he was about to walk into its heart with a human crew and a Tokresh cub that thought he was its parent. The landing was controlled, almost ceremonial. They were met by guards, lots of them, but nobody tried to take Taeyang by force. That was something. They were escorted to a building that was more fortress than courthouse, all dark stone and narrow windows. Inside, the air smelled like metal and old blood. The chamber where the hearing would take place was enormous. It was carved from black stone, circular, with seating rising up on all sides. Thousands of Takresh could fit in here, and from the looks of it, thousands had come. Every seat was filled. Warriors, scholars, civilians, all of them staring down at the small platform in the center, where Hyun Woo would have to stand. "This is insane," Do-Yun whispered. His face had gone pale. "They're treating this like a gladiator match." "Stay calm," Hyun Woo said, though his own heart was pounding. "We knew it would be big." They were given a small room to wait in. Taeyang, who had been excited by all the new smells and sounds at first, was starting to get nervous. The cub pressed close to Hyun Woo, making small, worried sounds. He scratched behind its ears, the way he'd learned it liked. "It's okay," he murmured. "We're going to be okay." He wasn't sure if he was trying to convince Taeyang or himself. When they were called into the chamber, the noise was overwhelming. Thousands of Takresh, all talking, growling, snarling at once. It only got louder when they saw Hyunwoo and his crew walk in, with Taeyang trotting at his side. The council sat at the highest point, 7 ancient Takresh, with fur gone gray and eyes that had seen countless battles. Veskra was there too, standing on the opposite side of the platform, looking grimly satisfied. The eldest council member, a male with a voice like grinding stones, called the chamber to order. The noise died instantly. "We are here to decide the fate of the youngling, called Taeyang. Envoy Veskra, present your case." Veskra stepped forward. "The case is simple, honored council. A human crew has unlawfully taken custody of a Takresh youngling. By law and tradition, this youngling should be returned to its people immediately. Humans are prey species. They lack claws, fangs, armor, all the things that make us what we are. They cannot possibly provide proper care for a predator." She went on for nearly an hour, presenting evidence and arguments. She showed images of human anatomy, pointed out their weakness compared to Takresh. She played recordings of Taeyang's early tantrums, making it look like the cub was suffering under human care. She was good at this, Hyunwoo had to admit. Very good. When she finished, the council member gestured to Hyunwoo. "The human will speak." Hyunwoo stepped forward, looking up at thousands of predators, all watching him with those sharp eyes, was one of the most terrifying things he'd ever done. But he thought about Taeyang, sleeping peacefully after weeks of nightmares. He thought about the trust in those golden eyes. "You're right," he said. His voice seemed small in the huge chamber, but it carried. "I'm human. I don't have claws or fangs. I can't see in the dark like you can. I'm weak by your standards." "All of that is true," he could hear murmuring from the crowd. Veskra looked surprised that he was agreeing with her. But when we found Taeyang, none of that mattered. The cub was alone, terrified, trapped in a destroyed ship, with the bodies of its people floating around it. It was having nightmares, every single night, screaming itself hoarse. Nothing we tried helped. Sedatives just made it worse. Recordings of Takresh sounds made it panic more. He pulled up the recordings Mireille had prepared on a holographic display. The chamber fell silent as they watched Taeyang thrash and scream, night after night. It was hard to watch. Even now. This went on for 10 days, Hyunwoo continued. 10 days, where that cub barely slept, barely ate, just relived whatever horror it had witnessed over and over. And then one night, I tried something different. I didn't try to sedate it or scare away its nightmares. I just sat with it. When it woke up scared, I was there. And when it reached out its paw, I held it. He showed them the recording of that night, the moment when Taeyang's trembling stopped, when its eyes closed, when it finally slept peacefully. You call yourselves predators. You pride yourselves on strength. But strength isn't just about claws and teeth. Strength is being there when someone is afraid. Strength is choosing gentleness when everything in you wants to fight or run. Strength is caring for someone weaker than you, not because they'll be useful someday, but because they need you. The chamber was completely silent now. Even Veskra had stopped looking smug. I don't know your customs. I don't know your traditions. But I know that Taeyang was dying inside when we found it. And now it's not. It plays. It explores. It's learning to trust again. And maybe that doesn't matter to you. Maybe all that matters is that I'm human, and it's Takresh. But to that cub, I'm the one who held its paw in the dark. I'm the one who stayed. He stepped back. His part was done. But before they could speak, something unexpected happened. Taeyang, who had been sitting quietly beside Hyunwoo throughout the entire hearing, stood up. The cub walked to the center of the platform, looked up at the council, with those bright golden eyes, and spoke. Takresh cubs aren't supposed to speak until they're much older. Their vocal cords aren't developed enough for complex language. But Taeyang managed one clear word in the Takresh tongue, loud enough for everyone to hear. Pack. The chamber erupted. The noise in the chamber was deafening. Thousands of Takresh voices raised in shock, anger, confusion, and something else Hyunwoo couldn't quite identify. Hope, maybe, or fear. It was hard to tell with a species that expressed most emotions through growls. Taeyang stood in the center of the platform, small and defiant, tail held high. The cub looked up at the council without fear, then turned and walked back to Hyunwoo, pressing against his legs in a gesture that needed no translation. This is my human. This is my pack. The eldest council member raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent again. His ancient eyes moved from Taeyang to Hyunwoo, and back again. The youngling has spoken. Wanted 100s, he said slowly. This is unprecedented. Cubs this age should not have the vocal control for speech. Trauma and necessity can accelerate development. Another council member said. This one was female. Her fur marked with silver. We have records of this happening in extreme circumstances. But for a cub to claim a human as pack, a third council member shook his head. This has never happened. Can never happen. Humans are prey. The natural order, the silver-furred female interrupted, is that we protect our young and honor their bonds. If this youngling has chosen to bond with a human, that is its right under the old laws. The laws that predate our current customs. Hyunwoo could see the council members looking at each other, having a silent conversation with glances and small movements. Veskra looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. This wasn't going the way she'd planned. The eldest council member leaned forward. Captain Hyunwoo, answer me honestly. Do you understand what it means that this cub has claimed you as pack? I understand it means something important, Hyunwoo said carefully. Beyond that, probably not. I'm not Takresh. There was a ripple of something through the crowd. Amusement, maybe. The old council member's ears twitched in what might have been approval. It means the youngling sees you as family, not just caretaker, but true family. To separate you now would cause psychological damage that could last its entire life. For us to ignore this bond would violate our most sacred duty, to protect the well-being of our young. However, another council member spoke up. There is the matter of the youngling's education. It must learn our ways, our language, our culture. It cannot grow up entirely among humans. We're not trying to make Taeyang human, Hyunwoo said. We know it's Takresh. We want it to know that too. The council members conferred quietly among themselves for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, the eldest spoke again. We have reached a decision. Captain Hyunwoo will retain custody of the youngling Taeyang. However, he must return to Takresh Prime once per cycle so that we may ensure the cub is healthy and properly learning its heritage. Additionally, the youngling must undergo the traditional trials when it comes of age, to prove its worth as a Takresh warrior. Hyunwoo felt his knees go weak with relief. We agree. Thank you. Do not thank us yet, the silver-furred female said. Her voice was kind, but firm. You have chosen a difficult path, human. Raising a Takresh is not easy, even for us. For you, it will be harder. The youngling will grow strong, much stronger than you. It will have instincts you cannot fully understand, and there will be many among our people who will never accept what you have done here today. I know, Hyunwoo said, but we'll figure it out. Together. The council dismissed them, and the crowd began to filter out, still talking loudly among themselves. As Hyunwoo gathered Taeyang and his crew to leave, Veskra approached. She looked different now, less angry and more thoughtful. I owe you an apology, Captain, she said stiffly. Apologies clearly didn't come easily to her. I underestimated you. I thought you were simply an ignorant human who had stolen what did not belong to him. I did not understand what you had actually done. What's that? You showed our youngling something we Takresh often forget in our pursuit of strength. You showed it that gentleness is not weakness. That care is not shameful. She looked down at Taeyang, who was watching her warily. Perhaps we have become too rigid. Perhaps there are many kinds of strength, and we have honored only one. She turned to leave, then paused. The council was generous today. Do not make them regret it. If that cub suffers under your care, I will know. And next time, no trial will save you. Understood, Hyunwoo said. But Taeyang won't suffer. I promise you that. Veskra nodded once and left. Mireille let out a breath she'd been holding. Well, that was intense. Can we please never do anything like that again? Doyun said. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one day. My heart can't take it. See, they made their way back to the ship through crowds of curious Takresh. Some stared openly. Some muttered disapprovingly. But a few, mostly younger ones, looked at them with something like admiration. One young female even approached and touched Taeyang's head gently. Be strong, little one, she said in Galactic Standard. You have chosen an unusual path, but perhaps an important one. Back on the ship, once they were safely in space and heading away from Takresh Prime, the reality of what had happened finally hit them. They'd won. Against all odds, against an entire species of warriors and predators, they'd won the right to keep Taeyang. Hyunwoo sat in the cargo bay that night, his usual spot, with Taeyang curled up beside him. The cub was exhausted from the long day and had fallen asleep almost immediately. No nightmares came. They rarely did anymore. Mireille found him there an hour later. She sat down next to him, careful not to wake Taeyang. You know this is just the beginning, right? We've got at least 15 more years of this. Probably longer. I know. Taeyang's going to get big. Really big. And strong. There will be problems we can't even imagine yet. I know that too, Mireille smiled. Good. Just making sure you understand what you've signed up for. She reached over and gently stroked Taeyang's fur. The cub made a small, happy sound in its sleep. For what it's worth, I think you did something amazing today. You made an entire species question their assumptions about strength and weakness. That's not nothing. I just didn't want to give up a scared kid, Hyunwoo said. Everything else kind of happened around that. That's exactly why it worked, Mireille said softly. You didn't have some grand plan or philosophy. You just cared. Sometimes, that's enough. The years that followed were challenging. Just as Veskra had warned, Taeyang grew rapidly, as all Takresh did. Within 2 years, the cub was as tall as Hyunwoo. Within 5, it was taller and stronger than any human could ever be. There were difficult moments, times when instinct took over, and Taeyang accidentally hurt someone, Times when the cub struggled with being caught between two worlds, not fully human, but not quite Takresh either. But through it all, Hyunwoo and his crew never gave up. They learned, they adapted, they made mistakes, and fixed them. And most importantly, they loved Taeyang unconditionally. The annual trips to Takresh Prime became routine. Each time, the council would examine Taeyang, test its knowledge of Takresh culture and language, and each time they would allow the visits to continue. Over time, even the most skeptical council members had to admit that the unusual arrangement was working. Taeyang grew into something unique. A Takresh warrior, yes, with all the strength and skill of their species, but also something more. Where other Takresh conquered, Taeyang protected. Where others dominated, Taeyang guided. The young Takresh became known throughout the sector, not as a fighter, but as a mediator. Someone who could bridge the gap between predator and prey species. On one of their visits to Takresh Prime, years later, the silver-furred council member who had spoken in their favor pulled Hyunwoo aside. She was very old now, her fur almost white. "You have done well, human," she said. "That youngling has become something we did not know was possible. A warrior with compassion, strength, tempered by gentleness. Taeyang did that, not me," Hyunwoo said. He was older too, his hair starting to gray at the temples. "I just held its paw in the dark." "That is more than you realize," she said. "You showed us that there are many paths to strength, and that sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is be gentle." That night, Hyunwoo sat with Taeyang under the strange red stars of Takresh Prime. The young Takresh was massive now, all muscle and sharp claws. A predator in every sense. But when it looked at Hyunwoo, its eyes were still the same. Still golden. Still full of trust. "Do you remember?" Hyunwoo asked. "Those first nights on the ship? The nightmares?" 14. Taeyang made a low rumbling sound, the Takresh equivalent of a thoughtful hum. "Sometimes," it said. Its voice was deep now. Nothing like the chirps and growls of cubhood. "But mostly, I remember waking up, and you being there. Always there." "I'll always be there," Hyunwoo said. "That's what family does." Taeyang rested its large head on Hyunwoo's shoulder, careful not to put too much weight. "I know," it said simply. "You taught me that." Above them, a shooting star traced a line across the red sky. Somewhere in the galaxy, there were people who still thought humans were weak. That predators couldn't learn gentleness. That strength was only measured in claws and teeth. But here, on a warrior's world, under alien stars, a human and a predator sat together in perfect peace. And that was a kind of strength all its own.